We have a Second Amendment right to bear arms. The problem? Courts have made the rules so confusing that even a small mistake can land you in jail and facing serious charges. In this video, I'm breaking down the 10 mistakes cops are counting on you to make when carrying a firearm, and more importantly, what you can do to protect yourself. Mistake number 1 is to mix carrying while playing. Watch out for this one. This is one of the most common mistakes I see people make when carrying in their car. Let's say you had a great night out with friends. Maybe you were out having dinner and maybe you had 2 or 3 glasses of wine and then you have to drive home. Suddenly, a police officer pulls you over for speeding, and all of a sudden he walks up to your front door and he starts claiming that he smells the odor of an alcoholic beverage on your breath. He gets you out of the car, he starts making you do field sobriety tests, but you've done nothing wrong. Here's the truth. If you've had anything to drink at all, there's a very high probability when a police officer pulls you over for a routine traffic stop that he will get you out of the car, he'll run you through certain field sobriety tests, and there's a good chance he's going to arrest you for driving while intoxicated. The worst part is not only will you be charged with driving while intoxicated, you'll also be charged with unlawful carrying of a weapon. Why? Because although it may be legal to carry in your car under your state laws or under your state permit laws, once the officer now believes or claims that you've been drinking and he thinks you're intoxicated, not only will you be charged with driving while intoxicated, but now you're going to be facing a new charge, a gun charge that you will have to defend in court, all because you were out having a good time with your friends, having a few drinks. So plan ahead here. If you're having a beer with buddies at a football game, get ready because you're making yourself a target for the police for a minor traffic violation that will lead to an arrest and possibly a gun charge. Mistake number 2. Forgetting about prohibited places while carrying. I have seen so many people make this mistake, and it's literally a mistake, no intent here, and they walk right into a place that lands them in jail. I'm going to give you a list of specific places you need to watch out for because I've had to help clients through most of these locations because they completely forgot and they ended up in jail. Places like the courthouse, nursing facilities, polling places, schools, universities, hospitals, airports, bars, public parks, amusement parks, racetracks, sports facilities, licensed childcare centers, correctional facilities, federal buildings, or here's a big one, any private business with a posted sign prohibited for you to come in if you're carrying. Now be careful here, because I know most concealed carriers, we just don't like this. Because the reality of it is private businesses can put out signs that prohibit you from carrying in their private business. And if you do so, they can claim that you're criminally trespassing. Every state has different laws, but I'm going to use an example of Texas. Texas has what's known as a 51% sign. This 51% sign means that the bar, if it's a bar, makes 51% of its revenues by selling alcohol. And the notice says this, I'm going to read to you the exact notice. It is unlawful for a person to carry a handgun on this premises, including a person licensed under, and then it gives the remainder of the language. Another example of a sign is a weapons prohibited sign. For example, in Texas, a 46.03 sign says, a person may not carry a firearm or other weapon on this property. Most states have similar signs to the signs I just mentioned. And when these signs are displayed, you need to be very careful because whether you're open carry or concealed carry, you are prohibited from entering the premises while carrying. And I'm going to tell you, failure to be self-aware of seeing that sign can actually land you not only in jail, but can become a total nightmare. I have literally had hundreds of people call my law office over the last 20 years because now they're facing an arrest at the airport because they completely forgot that they had their self-defense firearm in their carry bag. And now they're facing a 3rd-degree felony. But wait, what about open carry here? This is an area where many people that open carry miss the mark. Many businesses will post signs stating specifically that you are criminally trespassing if you enter their property with a firearm. For example, in Texas, it's known as a 30.05 trespass sign. It says very simply, a person may not enter this property with a firearm. But in Texas, if you have a license to carry, you can enter these buildings unless it is a 30.06 sign, which says this: pursuant to 30.06, a person licensed under handgun licensing law may not enter this property with a concealed handgun. I could keep going with more of these signs, but man, is this not a mess to keep up with? I mean, there are serious consequences at play here if you ignore these signs. Remember, if you're at a place where you didn't notice a sign, and then you have some jerk calling the cops on you, this is exactly the kind of mistake that cops will be looking for in order to take you to jail. Beware. Mistake number 3, brandishing your firearm. Many of us, probably most of us, have been in the situation where you're driving down the road and all of a sudden a road rage incident takes place and some jerk cuts us off and tries to force us off the road. Maybe you become concerned for your safety, so you grab for your self-defense firearm in order to protect yourself. Next thing you know, cops show up, and because you have a firearm, they believe the nutcase who claims you brandished your firearm during this road rage incident. Now, what exactly does it mean to brandish a firearm? I'm going to read for you from Title 18 USC section 924C4. And the code says this: the term brandish means, with respect to a firearm, to display all or part of the firearm, or otherwise make the presence of the firearm known to another person, to intimidate that person, regardless of whether the firearm is directly visible to that person. Now I want you to notice that definition. Quote, to intimidate that person, regardless of whether the firearm is visible. You know why I don't like that? I don't like that because that now comes down to the opinion of the person who's already decided they don't like you. In other words, some people just don't like anybody who has a firearm. So they may feel intimidated by the mere presence of a firearm, even if you didn't do anything with the firearm. How do you protect yourself here? Here's a good rule of thumb. Keep it holstered at all times unless they're coming after you. This is a legitimate attack. That's a different situation. But if you keep it holstered, it would be an unreasonable response for someone else to claim that you were brandishing your weapon. In my experience, the moment you pull the weapon out of the holster, most cops will believe you did brandish your firearm. The other important part here is, even if you have your hand on the firearm in the holster, be careful making any type of threats. You don't want to say anything that's threatening to the other person while you have your hand on the firearm or if you've taken it out of the holster, because 999 times out of 1,000, the police are going to believe the other person who does not have a firearm, particularly if you made any type of verbal threats. Mistake number 4, failing to know your state rules for carrying during a traffic stop. We all want to protect ourselves while driving around in our vehicles, but carrying during a traffic stop is where I see more arrests than anywhere else. You must always start with knowing your state laws. Are you required to notify police that you are carrying under your state laws if you have a concealed carry permit? If you have a concealed carry permit, a great place to find out whether or not you have a duty to report this or not is a good resource, handgunlaw.us. Now, if you go to this particular website, you can find out as a concealed carry license holder whether or not your state requires you to have a duty to disclose that you're carrying. Even if your state laws do not provide you a duty to notify the officer, it's important to realize that the officer is likely going to run your license plate. And CHL permits are tied into the Department of Motor Vehicles in most states, which means the officer is going to already know that you have a license to carry. Now, I've seen this go both ways. If you disclose that you are carrying, the officer will many times just give you a good, hey, how are you doing? Glad to see that you're concealed carry permit holder, and he'll send you on your way. But if you fail to disclose when you had a duty to disclose, many times officers will see that as you being shady and maybe you're trying to hide something, and they may treat you different than they would otherwise. If you have a concealed carry license and you have a duty to disclose, it's usually smart to keep both your driver's license and your CHL permit tied together, hand it over to the officer along with any proof of registration or any insurance that you're required to provide. Okay, we've covered what you're required to do if you have a concealed carry license. What if you don't have a concealed carry license? What if you just have a firearm in your vehicle? You have no duty to tell the officer anything. It doesn't matter what state you're in. You have a right to remain silent. You do not have to tell that officer or give consent to search for anything in your car, much less a firearm in your car. Now, let's say the officer gets you out of the car though. What if he says, hey, listen, there's something here that's making me feel off. I need you to step out of the vehicle. Are you required to step out of the car? Yes, technically you are. If the officer claims and he can articulate some basis in his police report later to establish that he was concerned for his officer's safety, he can ask you to step out of the vehicle and you're required to do so. This was established in Pennsylvania versus Mims. Now, if he asks you to get out of the vehicle and you are carrying on your person, person. Back to if you've got a concealed carry license, or maybe you don't have a license and maybe the actual weapon is in the vehicle. If you know they're about to search, or if you know they're about to pat you down and you have the firearm, now is the time to disclose. Because I've seen police officers overreact and freak out if they find the firearm and you didn't tell them. Now, how do you tell them? Whatever you do, don't tell them I've got a gun. If you're a concealed carry license holder, you can tell them, officer, I'm a concealed carry license holder and I'm carrying right now. I would then personally ask the officer what he would like me to do. But whatever you do, I would not grab for the gun. Never grab for the gun. You may tell the officer that you're carrying, but you're going to make sure and keep your hands up. And at no time do you want to make it seem like you're escalating or providing a threat to the officer so that way he does not overreact. Deciding to grab for a gun, which I've seen this happen so many times, can be the fatal mistake that costs you your life. Or you could end up in a hospital because the officer has now been given a free license to believe he needs to do what he can to protect himself. Mistake number 5, arguing with the cops while you're carrying. Here's the basic rule. If cops are around, you're carrying, and then you get into an argument, get ready to go to jail. This is particularly true during traffic stops. So if a police officer pulls you over for, say, a speeding violation or something, he comes up to your window, knocks on the window, he is immediately trying to scope out your attitude. He's looking for any reason at all to believe his officer's safety is at risk. If he starts off the entire conversation by saying, hey, do you know why I stopped you tonight? And let's say your response is, I don't know what your problem is, but if you're gonna write me a ticket, hurry up. Is it legal to make that response? Absolutely. The problem with that is, what's he going to do? He's going to immediately start coming up with a pretext. The attitude he thinks you have, he's going to use as a pretext to claim his officer's safety is at risk. He will now get you out of the car and he'll plan on doing a pat down search of you. And then he may start doing a plain view search looking inside your vehicle to find any ticky-tack reason to either arrest, cite you, or search you. Now, instead, one of the best ways to respond to a police officer so that he could no longer claim his officer's safety is at risk is that when he comes up to you and starts wanting to know if you know why he pulled you over, you can easily say, no idea, officer. Hope you're having a good evening. Here's my driver's license and my insurance. Now, if the cop still asks you to get out of the car, remember you're going to have to do that under Pennsylvania versus Mims. If you have to do that, make sure you get out slowly, you move very slowly, and you don't raise your voice or cause anything to make the officer overreact. And many of you have put comments in my videos in the past where you've said, this is crazy. Why do I have to accommodate the police officers? I shouldn't have to do these things. The officers should be more aware of what the law is. Trying to give you the rules for the road here. Many times this is how police officers will treat it on the side of the road. And they will many times overreact when they see somebody that responds in a way they think is aggressive or they don't like your attitude. Speak calmly, professionally, and always follow your state laws. But if you start feeling like the police officer's taking it too far and violating your rights, always remember, you have constitutional rights. Stand up for those constitutional rights and record the entire encounter so that you have proof the officer was in the wrong. We have been covering the 10 mistakes cops are counting on you to make when carrying a firearm. But if you're like me, with big tech and media giants controlling so much of what we see and hear in the news, I have serious questions about intrusive algorithms, data privacy, and media bias. These concerns are precisely why I trust Ground News to cut through the noise and provide me a clear, informed perspective on the news. Ground News gives you the freedom to discover for yourself whether what you're reading in the news is biased and fair, so that you can come to your conclusions. Isn't that what the news is supposed to be about? You can check them out at ground.news/Hampton. Here's how it works. Take this recent story about the debate around whether the suspect accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO, Luigi Mangione, is a hero. If we look at the top right, we can see that over 65 sources have covered the story. 37% of the coverage is from right-leaning sources and just 21% from left-leaning sources. If we scroll down, we can also learn who owns the source's reporting. This is incredibly useful for identifying if a headline is being manipulated and seeing how different news agencies frame the same story. Ultimately, it can reveal the bias of a news source, empowering us to draw our own conclusions. Speaking of headlines, this left-leaning headline from MSNBC points out America's problem with vigilantes and hero worship. On the right, this headline from Fox Business mentions how GoFundMe and Etsy have cracked down on merchandise and fundraising for the suspect. You can't get this type of data and analysis anywhere else. My favorite feature is the blind spot tool. It features stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. I have found this feature an amazing way to discover stories I have missed because only one side is talking about it. The best part, Ground News has a special offer for my viewers. If you subscribe through my link, you'll get 50% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use to get access to all the unlimited features. This is their best deal of the year, and if you're already a subscriber, you can gift Ground News to your friends or your family for this same amazing 50% discount. I think Ground News is doing important work, and I hope you will check them out. Go to ground.news/Hampton to give it a try for yourself. Mistake number 6, never grab for a gun when you're around a cop. Now let's break this down into two situations. First, what if you're in your car, it's a traffic stop, and you're carrying, and the officer is asking you if you're carrying, or you have the duty to disclose to the officer that you're carrying. In that situation, what you want to do is if the officer, for some reason, and I've seen a few rookie cops do this, if they ask you to hand them the gun, never do it. Always keep your hands up on the steering wheel. Keep your hands present at all times. You need to be visible at all times. Never grab for anything under the seat. Never make them to where they think you're making a furtive movement or grabbing towards the center console or over towards the actual glove box. That's the worst thing you can do, because whether it's a primary officer or one of the assist officers on the other side of the car, I've seen them overreact time and time again, thinking that someone's grabbing for a weapon, and they draw down on someone, and you end up having a very serious altercation where somebody gets hurt. Always think like this. If I grab for my firearm in front of a police officer, I could get shot. And it's very true, because the law will be on the side of the officer who will claim that he believed his safety was at risk and he took that measure, pulling out his weapon, and whatever he chose to do will many times be justifiable. The second situation, though, is maybe not during a traffic stop, but what if an officer gets you out of the car, or maybe you're just walking down the road and now he wants to do a pat-down search of you and he asks you, are you carrying? Do you have anything on you? Is there anything I'm going to find when I search you? Now, the worst thing to do is to reach and grab for it. I've actually seen people go, yeah, I've got a concealed carry license, and they go to grab for their gun. The officer overreacts, throws them up against the car, puts them in nearly a chokehold position down on the ground to do a full search. So you have to remember, if you're going to tell the officer you're carrying, whether it's in a traffic stop or it's openly, you just walking down the road, keep your hands above you, let the officer know, you invite him to reach in and grab custody of the weapon. Never be the one that hands the gun to the officer. Mistake number 7, failing to move slowly when you're inside the car or when the officer is patting you down. I get it. If an officer walks up to you and he wants to do a pat down search and you're carrying, it's easy to be nervous. I also understand that if you're carrying and you're in a traffic stop, it's really easy to get jittery, because once you get nervous, you start acting maybe a little strange. Maybe you start looking around. Maybe you start kind of grabbing around. Or I've seen officers mistake someone reaching over to scratch their arm or scratch their leg as their belief someone's acting aggressive and trying to reach for a weapon. If you are carrying and a police officer either walks up to you and he says that he's going to do a pat down search of you, move in slow motion. If you are carrying and you're in a traffic stop situation and an officer wants you to get out of the car, move in slow motion. Don't do anything quickly. Don't overreact in any way whatsoever. In fact, I would almost rather you not move than to move too quickly. And this is one of the most fatal mistakes I've seen when people do this, is that an officer will take it. I've literally seen somebody kind of stumble getting out of the car, and the officer believed he was trying to run away. He thought he was trying to evade arrest, even though he didn't even go anywhere yet, because the officers are on high alert and they may overreact to your reactions. If the officer walks up to you during a traffic stop and you need to grab for your ID in your wallet, first of all, I recommend you have that out before the officer gets up to the window. But if you have to reach for your wallet in order to grab your ID, you need to tell the officer you're doing that. Say, officer, my ID is in my wallet. I am now going to reach back into my back pocket only to grab my wallet. The same thing would hold true if you're trying to take off your seatbelt. Say, officer, I currently have my seatbelt on. At this point, I'm going to reach down and do it very slowly, and I'm going to unbuckle my seatbelt. When you move in slow motion, tell the officer what you're doing while you do it. And I've said this before on some of my other videos, but never keep your firearm or your proof of insurance in your glove box or your center console, because you're going to have to reach for these items, particularly your proof of insurance or whatever you have there. You're going to have to reach for those items, and that adds a whole nother risk to this police encounter. Mistake number 8, failing to consider, do I really need a concealed carry license? Or maybe I could just open carry. All but 4 states and the District of Columbia allow the open carrying of a firearm with or without a permit. This means that you can carry a firearm in public that is partially or fully visible as long as it is holstered. I won't get into the specifics about the open carry laws in all states, but you need to know your state's laws. The reason why is because some states' open carry laws will label open carry as you having a firearm that is even partially visible. If any part of it's visible, then it's open carry. Whereas other states label open carry only if it's fully visible. Now, the real question here is whether you should open carry. Simply because a state allows you to open carry doesn't necessarily mean it's the best choice for you. Some of this is going to depend on your state laws, because let's say you're not old enough to get a concealed carry permit in your particular state. Or maybe you don't qualify for some specific reason for a concealed carry permit. In that situation, you're going to want to open carry in order for you to have a self-defense firearm. However, in other situations, it may be in your best interest to conceal your firearms. Think about if you actually got into an encounter with someone. If you're in an open carry situation, you actually provide an advantage to the bad guy. The bad guy can see that you're armed because you're open carrying. That allows him to formulate a plan, and now you could be at a disadvantage. Not only that, but you can also get yourself in trouble with the police because in some states, open carrying will prohibit you from going to certain places and locations that you could be allowed to carry your firearm if you have a concealed carry permit. For example, in North Carolina, some local municipalities prohibit the display of a firearm if you're on a public roadway or a public place. And cops are watching for this. So if you open carry in these areas, they'll use it as a reason to either cite you or arrest you. For example, in other parts of the country, there are many municipalities that will ban open carrying in public parks or at special events or in public buildings. You can count on cops watching for Second Amendment fans like you and I to make a mistake, violating some small little ticky-tack rule as a basis for a potential arrest. How do you protect yourself here? Know your state laws before you arrive and before you choose to open carry there. Otherwise, the cops will use your ignorance of the law as an excuse to lock you up. But what about concealed carry? Is it a better option than open carry? I've got some good friends that strongly believe that concealed carry provides you more legitimacy under the law and more flexibility with police. For example, many advocates believe that when a police officer finds out you have a concealed carry license, they know right out of the gate you're not a convicted felon, you've passed a background check, and they tend to give you a bigger benefit of the doubt. The other benefit of concealed carry license is many times there is a reciprocity agreement between different states for which you will not get in trouble for your carrying. Now be careful here though, some states don't care about any reciprocity and they don't care that you have a license to carry. You can still end up in jail. But beware of the laws in your state if you choose to conceal carry. Because remember those pesky duty to disclose, that's the one big law that I just don't prefer, because when you have those duty to disclose laws, it can put it back on you. And if you fail to disclose that you're carrying during a traffic stop, you can end up being cited for it. Mistake number 9, be careful treating daytime carry the same as nighttime carry. A traffic stop at night is 10 times more dangerous when you're carrying a firearm. When cops walk up to your window during a traffic stop, the number one thing they're thinking about is, what did they see inside of your vehicle and on your person that makes them feel that they should be in fear for their life? So one of the first things you could consider doing is turning on the dome light of your vehicle and making sure you don't move too quickly doing anything. In fact, in addition to not moving too quickly, I advise you that you keep your hands up on the steering wheel pretty much at all times, because the number one thing that will spook a police officer is for them to believe that you're making furtive movements. You're turning here, you grabbed underneath your seat, you looked over to try to grab something off of the passenger seat. These are the kind of things that will have an officer go pull for his weapon and yank you out of the car, and things can escalate very quickly. Even though you have no duty to put the police officer at ease. If you turn on your dome light, maybe turn the engine off, keep your manner and your attitude at a professional level. The main goal of a traffic stop is to hand the officer over what he needs for his driver's license and insurance and get out of there. Because at the end of the day, if you're carrying, particularly if you don't have a license and you've got the weapon in the car, you don't want to extend the traffic stop where you give some officer a reason to get you out of the car, searching your vehicle. Not only will you be sitting on the side of the road for hours, it could lead to a full-blown criminal investigation. Finally, mistake number 10, failing to exercise your constitutional rights if the police get out of line. It is your Second Amendment right to bear arms, and you have a right to defend yourself. But what happens if you run into an ignorant rookie cop or a veteran cop with a huge ego? This is where you must realize you will not be able to talk a bad cop out of arresting you or violating your rights. What do we do in this situation? Well, after you have followed the best practices that we've covered in this video, you can always start by exercising number one, your right to have an attorney present before any further questioning. You have a Sixth Amendment right to counsel during any questioning. And in fact, the best way to exercise this right is to say, "Officer, I refuse to answer any questions without my lawyer present." What if the cop ignores your right to an attorney during this time? You can just repeat the same phrase over and over again. "Officer, I refuse to answer any questions without my lawyer present." Number two, you have a right to refuse any searches by the police. In fact, you have a right to refuse any searches of your person, your property, or your vehicle. You can simply tell the police, "Officer, I do not consent to a search of my person, my property, or my vehicle." Number three, you have a right to remain silent. You always, under our Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, have a right to remain silent when a police officer is attempting to question you. Realize that every answer you provide to a police officer's questioning when he is out of line is a way for him to be able to manipulate and interpret whatever you say as a basis to supposedly say that you confessed to something you did not do. You can simply say, "Officer, I exercise my right to remain silent," then remain silent. Number four, you have the right to not be illegally detained. In other words, cops can't keep you on the side of the road forever, or cops can't just leave you standing there forever. The best way to establish this right with the police is to simply ask the officer, "Officer, am I free to leave?" This forces police to substantiate why they are continuing to hold you on the side of the road. And it also makes it crystal clear that you are not consenting to this encounter. And that way, if they continue to hold you for an unreasonable period of time, they will have to substantiate it in court. Finally, number five, you have a right to record the police encounter. Never forget to turn on your phone during the encounter with the police. As the officer's walking up to the front of your car, turn on your phone. Leave it sitting right there the whole time. Or turn on the dash cam that maybe you have inside your vehicle. You want to make sure you record the entire encounter. This protects you when you know you did nothing wrong. And if you run into a bad cop, video evidence is so important because it's no longer his word against your word. You now have hard evidence showing you did nothing wrong and the officer was out of line. The First Amendment gives you the right to record police, and you should exercise that right to protect yourself. Now, speaking of exercising your Second Amendment right to bear arms, what if you're traveling across state lines and you're carrying? Did you know that there are some states in our country that are ready to take you in for exercising your Second Amendment rights? Check out this next video where I break down how to protect yourself when traveling with a gun. See you over there.